From NBC News election headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. Yes, we're still here, and it's still too close to call. A determined Vice President Al Gore continues to hold a lead in both the national popular vote and in the Electoral College, but Texas Governor George W. Bush remains confident he'll win the state of Florida after a recount, and that will put him over the top in the Electoral College, making him the president-elect. Here are the numbers. First, the national popular vote, with Al Gore holding a steady lead over Governor Bush. In the electoral map, Governor Bush with victories in 29 states for a total of 246 electoral votes. Vice President Gore, 19 states and the District of Columbia for 260 electoral votes. But the big prize still to be claimed, Florida, 25 electoral votes. This is a Florida ballot that is being recounted tonight, and the confusing lineup of candidates may have led to still more problems in that state. NBC's Claire Shipman is still on duty with the Vice President tonight, David Gregory with the Governor, and Kerry Sanders is in Florida. Claire, the Vice President wants this to be resolved, but he does not want a rush to judgment.
Tom, the Gore campaign is adamant tonight. They will fight this issue of the Florida ballot until every vote is clear. Why? They say they still think Al Gore can win. A confident and determined Al Gore in Nashville today, making extremely clear he is not close to conceding this election.
Because of what is at stake, this matter must be resolved expeditiously, but deliberately and without any rush to judgment.
At the same time, Gore says he does not want to provoke a crisis.
No matter what the outcome, America will make the transition to a new administration with dignity, with full respect for the freely expressed will of the people.
And former Secretary of State Warren Christopher, brought in to manage the situation, makes plain that the campaign is not trying to challenge the election based solely on Gore's win of the popular vote.
I don't have any reason to think we're on the edge of a constitutional crisis.
But Gore's campaign chairman Bill Daley leaves no doubt Gore still believes he can win in a recount.
We believe when those votes are counted and that process is complete, totally complete, Al Gore will have won the Electoral College and the popular vote, and therefore will be the next president.
Does the Vice President share your belief, sir, that he will prevail in Florida? Say yes?
Yes. Beyond a recount, Gore advisors, swarmed by reporters in Nashville, say they plan to challenge reports of vote irregularities in Florida. Christopher and Daley are on their way to Florida now. And officials warn that they believe an accurate recount can't happen in a matter of days. How long is Gore willing to push this? Maybe for weeks, but not indefinitely, say aides. He does not want to seem a spoiler. But they say that his win of the popular vote gives him the authority to proceed right now. And Tom, they also say that popular vote win is giving him some personal comfort in the face of a loss. As one aide said, we won the election. Whether we get inaugurated is another deal. Tom?
Thanks very much, NBC's Claire Shipman tonight. Now let's go to Austin, Texas, and Governor George W. Bush. NBC's David Gregory is still on his feet tonight, and Governor Bush, it's fair to say, is equally confident and determined. David?
That's right, he is, Tom. In fact, Governor Bush expressing confidence today that Florida recount will validate his victory, making him the president-elect. That recount not expected to be completed until 5 o'clock tomorrow evening. That's Eastern Time. Bush today announcing that former Secretary of State James Baker will lead a team of lawyers to Florida to represent the campaign in that recount. Now, so confident is Governor Bush that things will break his way, NBC News has confirmed he is already laying the groundwork for his transition. Aides telling us that Dick Cheney, his running mate, of course, will head the transition team. We've also learned that former Transportation Secretary Andrew Card is Bush's likely choice for White House Chief of Staff. Bush today, speaking to reporters, promised a smooth transition. If that result is confirmed. Saying today that he would promise, along with his vice president-elect, that's what he thinks he'll be, to unite the country in the face of such an exciting and dramatic election. The developments today coming on the heels of one very long night, of course, an election cliffhanger that many of us up late to cover it found just too dramatic to believe.
Early on, ground zero in the electoral race becomes clear.
Just before 8 p.m. in the East, a projection that portends trouble for the Texas governor. Al Gore appears to have won Florida.
NBC News projects that he wins the 25 electoral votes in the state of Florida.
The news comes during a Bush family dinner. Startled, they quickly return to the governor's mansion. The nominee works the phones, criticizing the network's projection as premature.
A state like Florida, for example, I'm going to wait till they count all the votes. And I think America ought to wait before they count all the votes, too.
In the blustery Texas capital, Bush supporters hold out hope as campaign strategists start seeing the votes come their way. Just after 10 p.m., all the broadcast networks change their projections.
What the networks giveth, the networks taketh away.
Florida has, incredibly, become too close to call.
And the 2-minute walk to the governor's mansion tells the story. Everybody can peer inside and just know how hard the phones are being worked.
By 2:17 a.m., relief and elation within the Bush campaign as yet another new projection hits the air.
George Bush is the president-elect of the United States. He is one.
At last, the outcome appears certain. Austin erupts in cheers. The vice president calls to concede and is on his way with speech in hand to admit defeat. And then another jaw-dropping development. The vote count indicates a razor-thin margin. The vice president calls Bush again, this time to recant his concession. The circumstances have changed. I need to withdraw my concession until the situation is clear, Gore says, in what quickly becomes a tense call. Bush is said to be indignant.
I thought it was an interesting comment he made, and I felt like I was fully prepared to go out and give a speech and thanking my supporters, and he withdrew his earlier comments.
Sources close to Gore recall Bush saying that his brother Jeb assured him he'd won. Gore responds, "Your little brother does not have the last word on this." Also, Gore is heard to say, "Well, you don't have to get snippy." A standoff before sunrise, and the race remains a cliffhanger. And 13 and a half hours later, we are still here, and it remains so, all of us bleary-eyed but still breathless, waiting for official word on who the next president will be. Tom?
Thanks very much, NBC's David Gregory tonight. In Florida tonight, which is the center of all the attention, there is a sudden surge of lawyers, campaign advisors, and 2 former secretaries of state headed for Florida to do battle over this critical recount. NBC's Kerry Sanders is in that state tonight. Kerry?
Well, Tom, tonight NBC News has learned the Gore campaign has contacted Florida's most powerful law firm to explore the possibility of a challenge to the Florida vote, a vote so close that under Florida law, it must be recounted. Tonight, high security and intense scrutiny as each of Florida's 67 counties begins a mandatory vote recount, 6 million votes. This while voting irregularities are alleged in some counties around the state. Florida's Republican Governor Jeb Bush, with Florida's Democratic Attorney General reassuring the nation that the recount will be honest.
Voter fraud in our state is a felony, and guilty parties will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
In Palm Beach County on Florida's East Coast, Democrats charge a confusing ballot layout led voters to think they were punching the ballot for Al Gore when they were actually voting for Reform Party candidate Pat Buchanan. Mark Andrews among those who now thinks he voted for Buchanan when he meant to vote for Gore.
I feel like I've been totally had.
Buchanan's vote is 3 times higher in Palm Beach County than his next highest total in Pinellas County, and Gore gets 270,000 votes with this ballot. Why this ballot layout? The supervisor of elections, a Democrat, says she designed it so older voters would be able to read the larger print.
Hindsight's 20/20, and I'll never do it again.
Local Democratic officials say they will challenge the entire county's results. And in Osceola County in central Florida, Democratic Party officials charge the vote totals are invalid and illegal. They accuse the Elections Department of using faulty voting booths. Allegedly, ballots did not fit properly into the slots. They say that misalignment shifted votes away from Al Gore. Their evidence, Libertarian Harry Brown got 309 votes here, in a county where there are only 112 registered Libertarians.
I think that we need to question that.
In Volusia County in central Florida, even more confusion. A poll worker shows up to the elections office this afternoon with a bag of ballots. Why are they showing up now? The supervisor of elections says it was a mistake, but that the ballots were counted last night. Now, an election official in Volusia County tells NBC News there were some irregularities in the vote count in that county. But state officials say the system worked and that people should be warned not to overread anything into this until the entire vote for the state is recounted, and then they can make their judgments. Tom?
Thanks very much, NBC's Kerry Sander. Joining me once again is our Washington Bureau Chief, Tim Russert, who's also moderator of Meet the Press. Tim, there are political consequences, obviously, that go well beyond who gets to go into the White House, although that's the central question here. For Governor George W. Bush, he cannot appear to be too eager, especially about accepting affirmation from a state where his brother is the governor.
Absolutely, Tom. The American people will insist upon an honest count. If by 5 o'clock tomorrow the recount shows that Governor Bush has a majority of the votes, or similar to what occurred last night, then the burden of proof shifts to Al Gore to prove something untoward happening. Then they have to count the 5,000 or so ballots from out-of-country absentees. If they begin to count those, and there's a smaller and smaller amount, say fewer left uncounted than the margin of Governor Bush's victory, it's that time to close it down. And I think the governor, and certainly Mr. Cheney, would do just that.
But at the same time, given what we have been through in Florida in the last 30 hours, with all the models going awry on us, missing ballot boxes, all the irregularities that we're talking about there, the Vice President of the United States, understandably, wants to see this through, and it may take a couple of days, but the danger for him is that he can't extend it too long, nor can he become a whiner about Florida at some point.
Absolutely right. If at 5 o'clock tomorrow, the recount says George W. Bush carried Florida by 2,000 votes, the Vice President is more than justified in saying, wait a minute, there's another 5,000 absentees coming in. Well, after they count 3,000 or 4,000 of those, they say, well, can we stop? Because it's mathematically impossible for you to win, Mr. Vice President. If they continue then to file lawsuits, to begin to contest various areas of the state, then people begin to suggest, uh-oh, this is not magnanimous. This is being a sore loser. I think the Vice President understands that as well. These two men are patriots. They ran very aggressive, good campaigns. The country's watching, and they're willing to tolerate until we get an honest count. But if it starts dragging into petty politics, and we get to Thanksgiving, and we still don't know who our president is, I think the public will not have much patience with the candidate they believe is dragging it out.
We're rewriting American history and law at the same time. We'll see what happens to the Electoral College after all this. Thanks very much, Tim Russert. Now let's take a closer look at recounts and what happens. NBC's Pete Williams tells us tonight, if history is any guide, the Gore team does not have a lot to look forward to.
When Connie Mack of Florida was first elected to the U.S. Senate 12 years ago, his opponent demanded a recount. The result of Buddy McKay's challenge, a change of only 3 votes, so he gave up. Nationwide, election consultants say a recount like the one underway now in Florida almost never changes the result. So what else could the losing candidate try? Under Florida law, the loser could protest results in various precincts, hoping for yet more recounts in those areas. Ask for a manual instead of machine recount, hoping a more thorough check might turn up irregularities. Or go to court, arguing that election laws weren't properly followed. That's what the loser did in Miami's race for mayor 3 years ago. Xavier Suarez asked for a new election. But the court said no, and legal scholars in Florida say the law makes it very hard to ever get a new election.
You would go through a period of time, very rapid, of litigation. The courts are going to be very reluctant to intervene in a way that requires a second election.
Courts are willing to invalidate individual contested ballots, but tossing out the Buchanan votes in Palm Beach County, for example, would not give those votes to Al Gore. So the best the loser of the current recount can hope for is that by protesting and contesting, he'll find enough mistakes across Florida to change the results. The legal standard for getting a judge to act is showing that it's doubtful an election expressed the will of the voters, and that's very hard to prove. Pete Williams, NBC News, Washington.
So how did all of those projections on who won the Florida presidential vote go so wrong? Here's NBC's Andrea Mitchell. Andrea?
Tom, with all our high-tech computers, the question tonight is how did all the networks get Florida wrong twice? Well, the answer is an incredibly close race and some really bad numbers. For the second time in one night, the election's most critical state is projected incorrectly.
We don't just have egg in our face, we've got omelet all over our suits.
It all starts 8 hours earlier. The networks award Florida to Gore, even before all the votes are counted.
A big call to make. CNN announces that we call Florida in the Al Gore column.
How is that done? Every election day, the networks jointly interview people after they vote and compare those exit polls with actual results to determine trends and help project winners. But last night, a major glitch. When the vote is counted, Bush is ahead, not Gore.
There are all kinds of things that can happen. We can have a data entry problem. Somebody puts a number in incorrectly. We can have incorrect counts being reported.
2:17 a.m. and
So at 2:17 a.m., using identical computer results, all the networks switch, give Florida to Bush. That puts him over the top, makes him president-elect. But less than 2 hours later, another turn. The Bush lead narrows. Now it's too close to call.
It's a fallible system. People did not make those calls deliberately because no one would put their reputation or the reputation of their network or the reputation of their news divisions on the line by a deliberate mistake.
In fact, the Florida vote is so close, experts say a mistake is not surprising. And it's happened before. 40 years ago, another all-nighter.
At 7:19 a.m. Eastern Time, Senator Kennedy was elected President of the United States. The NBC Victory Desk has just given California to Kennedy, and that gives him the election.
David Brinkley was right about Kennedy becoming president, but wrong about California. That state eventually went to Nixon. And again, 24 years ago, Jimmy Carter makes fun of a newspaper headline showing him losing the Wisconsin primary. In fact, he won. Many people say that the real issue isn't why projections, often involving paper ballots, are sometimes wrong, but the archaic vote-counting system that often leads to mistakes and even fraud. Tom?
Thanks very much, NBC's Andrea Mitchell. No doubt some people are also raising questions about network judgments. I'll be right back with even more election drama, the battle for the Senate, the day's other news, exclusive new information on the bombing of the USS Cole.
The Italians gave the elegant style. The Germans gave the solid engineering. The combination that deserves all the attention. The affordable luxury, the new Laganza from Daewoo.
This is not a couch. It's a crash pad. And a greasy spoon, and Custer's Last Stand. It's where you live. And Febreze cleans away odors life leaves behind. Febreze, the cleaner clean for where you live. Now there's a new Febreze formula made for another spot in the house. New Febreze for the wash laundry additive eliminates odors in one wash. So for odor-free, truly clean-smelling clothes, get new Febreze for the wash.
Sunday, the television event of November.
I will bless you and make your name great.
From Adam and Eve to the Commandments, the first of mankind's greatest stories in one motion picture event.
To this man, I give all power in Egypt.
Jacqueline Bisset once and against Billy Campbell, Martin Landau, and Third Watch's Eddie Cibrian.
You still set yourself against my people. Let them go!
In the Beginning, Sunday on NBC.
Did you know your Aleve works on headaches, too? When my wife got bad headaches, the pain relievers she tried, they'd work for a while, then quit. So she'd have to take more. I had some Aleve for my arthritis pain, so she tried it. Now she's got her life back, and I've got her back.
Just 2 Aleve can stop pain all day. It would take 8 Tylenol to do that.
Thanks, Aleve, for making such a difference.
And now, cold sufferers can get the all-day strength of Aleve and new Aleve Cold and Sinus.
Who will be our next president? This incredible political story continues. The latest chapter tomorrow on Today.
Dateline Friday. One by one, they disappear. Who's killing the women of Spokane? When police make an arrest, his identity stuns everyone.
He just looked like a neighbor.
Could a husband, a father, be a serial killer?
It was shocking that I could be married to a man and not even know him.
A real-life mystery. Dateline Friday after Providence.
The Waiting Game, Bush or Gore, NBC Nightly News tomorrow.
Now to the new face and shape of Congress. Republicans still are in the majority, but the election has eaten away at the size of that majority in the House of Representatives. Democrats are likely to pick up 2 seats. In the Senate, there could be a historic shift in the balance of power. More tonight from NBC's Lisa Myers.
The first lady ever elected to public office, Hillary Clinton will become an instant celebrity in the Senate, serving alongside Republicans who tried to convict her husband during impeachment.
I think I will get a very positive reception. I have worked with a number of the Republican members in the past.
Today, the Senate's top Republican offers an olive branch and some advice.
I think it would be wise for it to take a little time to maybe just observe things and get used to the process and not try to assert too aggressively her obvious celebrity status.
Otherwise, a lot of shell-shocked Republican senators today, stunned after losing a net 3 and probably 4 seats. The casualties? Roth of Delaware, Abraham of Michigan, Grams of Minnesota, perhaps Gorton of Washington, though that's still too close to call, and Ashcroft of Missouri. Ashcroft lost to the first dead man ever elected to the Senate, former Governor Mel Carnahan, who perished in a plane crash and whose wife will be appointed to his seat.
Now, Missouri is a compassionate state, and I think in a very special way, they have demonstrated the compassion which they have.
The strong likelihood of a 50-50 tie in the Senate, which would be unprecedented, sent historians and parliamentarians scrambling for answers. If Bush wins, Dick Cheney, the vice president, would break ties in the Senate. If Gore wins, Lieberman would resign his Senate seat and almost certainly be replaced by a Republican, appointed by Connecticut's Republican governor. That would give Republicans a 51-49 majority. Either way, every vote is critical every day.
Well, I jokingly said that the most important person in the Capitol will be the Capitol physician, making sure he takes the pulse of every senator every morning.
Today, Democrats demand more power, reflecting their new equal numbers.
We recognize, and I hope they recognize, that the only way that Congress will accomplish anything is through bipartisanship.
The sharply divided Congress only complicates the task of the new president. Whether it's Bush or Gore, many here say he may quickly find that getting elected was the easy part. Lisa Myers, NBC News, the Capitol.
There is other news tonight as well, a breakthrough in the investigation of the terrorist attack on the USS Cole. More on that now from NBC Jim Miklashevsky at the Pentagon. He has an NBC News exclusive for us. Jim?
Tom, in a major development, U.S. senior officials tell NBC News that Yemen authorities are holding 2 suspects believed directly involved in the attack on the USS Cole, and that one of the suspects is, quote, key to the operation and talking his head off. U.S. officials report the suspect is providing explicit details how the attack was planned for more than a year, then executed with deadly precision. How one safe house and the suicide boat were acquired 13 months before the attack. That 2 other suspects, an explosives expert believed to be an Iraqi, and another, perhaps a Saudi, supervised the operation, then left Aden before the bombing. The suspect also claims they got help from low-level Yemen officials in forging documents, obtaining vehicles, and concealing their operation. But there's apparently no evidence the Yemen government itself was involved. Now, despite all this, sources say the suspect still hasn't named those directly behind the terrorist operation. But with this breakthrough, U.S. officials are increasingly confident tonight they'll soon know who actually gave the orders to attack the Cole. Tom?
All right, thanks very much, NBC's Jim Miklashevsky tonight, who will be staying on that story for us. On this day after the election, Wall Street was of 2 minds. Surges in the shares of some of the big pharmaceutical companies limited a drop of the Dow Jones Industrial Average to about 45 points, but the NASDAQ swooned 184 points today, a drop of more than 5% in that market. I'll be back with some final thoughts on this exceptional 24-hour period after a most unusual, historic election night.
We're Pfizer. We're working to create a world where there will be a cure for your father's Alzheimer's.
your sister's heart condition, your best friend's diabetes, where no one needs suffer from cancer or AIDS. At the newly expanded Pfizer, we're poised to do more for human health than any other pharmaceutical company in history. We're spending approximately $4.5 billion on research this year alone, and have the world's largest pharmaceutical research team working tirelessly, looking for the cures of the future. Why do we work so hard? Because we have fathers, sisters, and best friends too. At Pfizer, our company has changed, but our mission hasn't. Life is our life's work.
Enterprise? You rented our car from Enterprise?
Yeah.
Why Enterprise?
Because they pick us up. Free.
A free pickup? Wow. They ought to be #1.
They are #1.
Pick Enterprise. We'll pick you up.
There are times when you have trouble sleeping because you can't stop thinking about the tensions of the day. Try something different. New Aluna Sleep, the herbal supplement that won't knock you out, but relaxes you so you can drift off to sleep naturally. Aluna is not a drug. There are no groggy side effects. It promotes a natural sleep pattern in just a few nights. New Aluna. It doesn't make you sleep. It lets you sleep.
Bye-bye.
I can't tell.
I should have used Preparation H.
Preparation H Cooling Gel cools on contact for fast relief. Preparation H Cooling Gel cools on contact.
Oh, he looks so handsome. Mommy's big man. You're such a big boy. I'm going to give you a big kiss.
$4.92 saved buying Spike a holiday sweater online. $6.42 overpaid on shipping.
Oh, you look so precious.
If your gifts aren't being sent priority mail, you're probably paying too much. So make sure to ask for it.
Fly like an eagle.
The Senior PGA Tour. Coming this January to CNBC.
If he's talking about it, we don't know who the next president's going to be at this point.
Everyone's talking about it. Imus in the Morning, weekdays, only on MSNBC.
In the days leading up to this election, there was a fair amount of discussion about the possibility that one candidate could win the popular vote, the other the Electoral College, but that discussion was always couched in theoretical terms with references to those must-see elections back in the 19th century. But tonight, this House, the center of power in the world, still does not know whether the moving vans will be arriving from Texas in January or from just up the street from the Vice President's mansion. What we do know, once again, is that this vast and powerful nation, rich and poor, with so many interests, with so much at stake, is ultimately a land where the rule of law prevails. It was a bitterly contested election, but it will not be resolved by troops and tanks, by mass protests and boycotts, but instead by the Constitution and reasonable people working out their differences by a commonly accepted set of rules. That remains the most enduring and reassuring part of a remarkable evening, one for the ages. That's Nightly News for Wednesday. Special continuing coverage of this presidential race, still too close to call, all night on MSNBC on cable and MSNBC.com. I'm Tom Brokaw. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Nightly News is a presentation of NBC News. More Americans watch NBC News than any other news organization in the world.